Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN daff lamed gimel. We are in the heart of the sugya that's based on the rule that if a person is intending to be koine his shvisa, to take in Shabbos around the area where his or her eruv tchumen is, and halachically, even though the eruv tchumen is placed very nearby, they will not be allowed to take the eruv to them. The eruv will not be valid. And for that, the Mishnah gave a case on daf lamed beis amud beis, that if a person placed an eruv on a tree, if it's placed l'mayla masara tvachim ein eruv eruv, if the eruv is placed below the 10 tvachim height mark, the eruv is an eruv. And the Gemara is trying to analyze exactly what case is the Mishnah referring to, and where we are at is the following. Number one, our Mishnah follows Shitas Rebbe, who holds that anything that is prohibited to do because of a rabbinic rule, because of a shvus, certainly when it comes to a Eruvei Tchumen, that is something which we will be allowed to do bein hashmashes, and therefore, let's learn the following. A person was koine his shvisa, he's intending to take in Shabbos at the base of the tree. Just this is very interesting because the person physically is not there. So normally you would say, well, then the person's location is exactly where the eruv is. We see from our sugya it doesn't work that way. The person, the owner, the mishaleach, the one who sent the eruv to be placed there has to intend to take in Shabbos near the eruv. It doesn't have to be exactly together with the eruv. And that is the case over here, that the tree is b'reshus harabim. The tree has 4 by 4 tfachim width and has, now that you place the eruv above 10 tfachim, the eruv is in a reshus hayachid and the person is in a reshus harabim. That in itself will not explain the reason why the eruv is not an eruv, because we introduced on daf lamed beis amud beis a certain very lenient concept of Rava, which is that as far as Eruvei Tchumen is concerned, the location that you're taking in Shabbos, being that Chazal give you 4 amas before you begin counting the 2,000 amas, it's as if your 4 amas is a reshus hayachid, not that you physically can take the eruv down from lamayla masara to lamata masara. That's carrying from reshus harabim to reshus hayachid, but it's considered enough a reshus hayachid for us to say that who the eruva is in the same type of location, and therefore the eruv should be effective. And therefore we concluded that it must be that yes, you're taking in the Shabbos, your kavanah is to take in Shabbos at the base of the tree, which is near your eruv. But the eruv, the issue in the Mishnah is not only whether it's above 10 tfachim or below 10 tfachim, both the above and the below is beyond your 4 amas. And therefore we cannot apply the leniency of Rava, which is only for the 4 amas. Oh, so now that was the last detail just to answer the question we then asked last year. If the eruv is placed l'mayla ma'asara tfachim, which is a bona fide reshus hayachid, what needs to happen is 2 things. You have to take it down to the ground and bring it towards you. You can't take the eruv down from l'mayla ma'asara tvachim, the branch which is reshus hayachid, to reshus harabim. That's an act of biblical carrying, which may not be done bein hashmashes for eruv tchumen. Period. The eruv is not valid. But if you put it on a height of a branch, that's lamata masara. So we mentioned that that has a din of a cannibalism. And just to clarify something, on a biblical level, the airspace above Eirus Sarabim until 10 Tfachim is Eirus Sarabim, which really means that biblically, that branch is Eirus Sarabim. Is Eirus Sarabim. It's not Eirus Yachid because there's no Mechitzos Gavoyos Asara Tfachim. It's below 10 Tfachim. Even rabbinically, it's called a cannibalism, but again, when it comes to Bein HaShmashos, as certainly when it comes to Eruv Tchumen, we're not troubled by you not being allowed rabbinically to take it down. There is no shvus. So you can take it down from the branch until the ground. It's either biblically Rishus Harabim, or it is a cannibalism to Rishus Harabim. Like we spoke out to Rashi, we're speaking about a case where it's beyond your 4 amas, and transferring something, Dalad amas v'Rishus Harabim is also Midoi Raisa, but really there is a way of bringing it towards you by not making an akira and then making the next hanacha in the full 4 amas or more. That's like a biblical violation. But if you make an akira and a hanacha within 4 amas, that means you move it a little, then you move it a little, then you move it a little, even though again, with the Rabbanan, you are not allowed to do that because you might forget to pause in middle, and you might violate an Isser Doiraisa. But that is really only us with the Rabbanan, because we are afraid that you might. Again, our Mishnah is following Shitas Rebbe, that holds that anything that's prohibited because of shvus, loy gazru alav, bein hashmashos, that is the case of the Mishnah. So we're going to finish learning the explanation of the Mishnah, and we will have the source of the dispute of the Chachamim and Rebbe regarding this concept of whether you apply shvus in bein hashmashos or not. It's only Rebbe that says we may. What's the source? Where do we find that Chachamim argue? That's going to lead us into a brisa that will also be addressing the similar din of our Mishnah about putting the Eruv in an area where halachically there might be an issue of taking it towards you, and we will have what we will call the basket case, the Kalkala case, which just like we had a whole back and forth figuring out the case of the tree, the Gemara is going to spend a lot of time explaining and figuring out exactly the basket case. We're going to review the din of Rabbi Meir, Choykikim Lahashlim, which is a din that Rav Meir spoke about when it comes to Hilchos Mezuzah, but we mentioned it in the last Masechta, we already mentioned it in ERUVIN. We're going to review it today, and we will introduce one other Tana regarding an Eruv, which is the Shita of Rebbe Yehuda, that holds that if the Eruv is placed on an area that's not at least 4 by 4 Tfachim, since it's considered a non-Chashuv area, the Eruv is not valid either. And that will be another nuance that will be helpful in understanding the basket case of the Brisa. We left off on the Aflamet Gimel Amadalef on the top line in the Amid, Maila Maila and Umayla Mata. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar kol nidbar. So now the Gemara asks a very strong question. If the Mishnah would have been speaking about a person who's being kind of shvisa at the base of the tree, and the Eruv is above the person, the only question is, like the Mishnah says, whether it is below 10 Tfachim or above 10 Tfachim, then the words Lamaila Ulamata fits. It can be on the same tree, on the same part of the tree, on the trunk, on a branch. Question is high or low. But now that we're saying that regardless Lamaila Masara or Lamata Masara, the Eruv must be 4 amas, more than 4 amas away from the person, which means that the branches are going horizontally. If a branch goes out of the tree Lamata, then that branch will continuously be lamata. The branches go horizontally. For you to put it on a branch that's lamayla masara, it's on another branch. It's not mashma like this from the words of the Mishnah. Asks the Gemara, mayla mata. The Mishnah should have used a whole different expression. Whether you are putting it on the branch that's coming out lower or on another branch that's coming out above. It's mashma lamayla ulamata that it's on the same branch. So says the Gemara, yeah, it can be the same branch. It can be a branch that comes out of the trunk of the tree, lamata masara, and there's actually a location 4 by 4 there that you can place the Eruv on. So the branch goes out horizontally, and then it gives the hadar zakif. It goes up to lamayla masara, and again it goes out horizontally. So yeah, it's the same branch. It's only a higher in the branch or lower in the branch. Asks the Gemara, we're still not done yet. Because why don't we say, got my friends carrying something from a reshus hayachid to a karmelis, and now we're going to speak midrabanan. Is only in Israel midrabanan. We just established that what? That the branch lamata masara has a din of a karmelis. All right, even if you placed it on l'mayla masara tfachim, you will still be allowed to bring it to you. How? You take something from a reshus hayachid l'mayla, you bring it into a karmelis, then you take it from that karmelis and you bring it into a reshus harabim, which is taka something that may not be done midrabanan. But again, we are saying that the Mishnah follows Shita of Rebbe, that we're not concerned about that as far as Eruv Techumen is concerned, because it only has to go into effect Bein HaShmoshes, and Bein HaShmoshes regarding Shvus, Le'gazru Alav. Answers the Gemara, this is going to be the final nuance, must be that Kesherabe Mechatvin Olav, that the area that's Lamata Ma'asara Tfachim will not be considered a Karmelis, will not be considered a karmelis. By the way, this will answer, Danny, your question again. But as we have learned, that even if there's something that's 4 by 4, and it doesn't go up, there is no mechitza of 10 tvachim, it's 3 tvachim, it's from 3 tvachim, under 3 tvachim is loved, but it's 3 tvachim until 9 tvachim, so normally it has a din of a karmelis. But if that area is adjacent to the Reshus Harabim, and when people are walking and they have to adjust their backpack, they will lean on it and they will put their shoulders on it and they will readjust their pekel. So it's being it's servicing the Reshus Harabim. It has a din of a Reshus Harabim. That will be the case of the Mishnah. So the area that's under 10 tfachim, even on a rabbinic level, has a din of a Reshus Harabim. Now it mamash fits. So taking it down from the branch Lamaila Masara to Lamata Masara is not Reshus Hayachid to Karmelis. No, it's Reshus Hayachid to Reshus Harabim. And Adarab, taking it down from the area of the branch that's Lamata Masara to the ground is mamish nothing. It's Reshus Harabim to Reshus Harabim. Kesherabim Mechatven Olav Uchid Ulam to Amar Ulam. That Amud, that is Tisha, Amud that has 4 by 4. If it doesn't have 4 by 4, it's called a Makim Tur. That it is a bit of Reshus Harabim. And the Rabbim Mechatven Olav, and people are using that to help them adjust their luggage. And someone threw the Zadak, the Nach al Dabav, if someone threw something from a Reshus HaYachid and it landed on that Amud, we don't say, oh, Reshus HaYachid to Karmelis, for which there's no Chiyuv Chatos. You're Chayiv Chatos because it's a bona fide Reshus Harabim. And just quickly reminding ourselves, all of these details were discussed by the 3 Amirayim, Rab Chia bar Abba, Rab Asi, and Rab bar Nassan. And that's why when they asked Rav Nachman, Taka, did you, this is the Gemara? This is the Gemara that we just learned. Rav Nachman says, yes, that will be the only case that we will give sense to the Mishnah's simple differentiation. Lamayla Masara, Lamata Masara, it has to be this case. Tree is Reshus Harabim, you're being shoyvis by the base, the branch goes horizontal, Lamata, up and again. Both cases, the Eruv is beyond your 4 ames, and the Rabbi Mechatven Olav. Okay, that's what I said. It's very, very, very limited. Says the Gemara Vayt. Now that we keep on mentioning Rebbe and the Rabbanan, my Rabbanan, Rebbe holds that anything that's connected to Shvus, loy gazru olav bein hashmoshes, the Chachamim argue with it, the Tanya. Now this Bryce is going to give 2 cases. Case number 1, which will be the tree case. Case number 2, which will be the basket case. Or the Reish and the Seif. The son may be Elon, mamish like our Mishnah, if the Eruv was placed on the tree, if it's L'mayla ma'asara tfachim, as we learned in our Mishnah, ein Eruvi Eruv, if the Eruv was placed on the tree, L'mata ma'asara tfachim, Eruvi Eruv, and again, Eruvi Eruv, here's where the Braiser writes clearly, but the Asur Litloi, why are we not allowed to take it? Because let's just begin with the one that could of Ishtamshus Be'ilan. True, we're not concerned. It doesn't take away the koyach for the Eruv Tchumen to go into effect, because, like we're saying, loy gazru olav, but you cannot actually take it, because you're not allowed to even remove something off a tree, like we explained, because this might have you lean on the tree, And if you lean on the tree, like when you climb a tree, you might end up cutting a branch off, violating an Isur Dorais. However, Shtamshus Be'ilun is only on the tree part of the tree. Any part of the tree itself, we learned this in Masechta Shabbos, or if you have roots that are going above the ground from the tree, if it's within 3 amas or 3 tfachim of the ground, mutar litlai, because it's bechlal not called a tree, it's called ground, and there's no isur derabanan of ishtamshus be'ilun. That's case number 1. Now, case number 2 is Dr. Braisa, the sunny bekalkalam. If the eruv was placed in a basket, utalai be'ilun, and it was hung on a tree. Now, this will be a statement that once we're in the sugya will be very difficult to understand. Even if the basket is hanging, and the question will be, how is that? How is that? If it's coming from a reshus hayachid, and like in the case of the Reisha, you are in a reshus harabim, but for some reason, eruv, these are the words of Rabbi. It's not even clear whether the Chachamim are saying the statement for the Seifa, for the basket case, or for the tree case, that kol mokim she'asru litroi, whenever you can't take it, ein eruv eruv. End of Braisa. Now the Gemara clarifies. The Chachamim oimnim ahaya. What are they referring to? If they are referring to Ilema Seifa, let's call the basket case. Let's say the basket case. And what did the Seifa say? That eruv eruv. Eruv. And the Chachamim are saying, how can you say that if it's Lamayla Masada Eruv, you may not remove it off the basket? And why would you not be allowed to remove it off the basket? Now, taking something off a tree is called Ishtamshus Be'ilan. Guys, remember, we learned this together. What happens if something is not on the tree? If something is on the side of the tree, right? Can you sit in a hammock that's tied on a tree? So there's Ilan, there's Sidei Ilan, and then there's Sidei Tzadadin. Very clear. All right, we learned that sugya. So, Lamashal, if you have a peg, a nail, a hook that is inserted in the tree, and the hammock is on the hook, that's called Sidei Tzadadin. You're not touching the tree. You're not even directly touching the hook. You're touching the hammock. By the way, by Tzidei Tzadadin, the halacha is that if the tree does not move, if the tree doesn't move, then you can use the hammock. But what happens if the hammock is not on a hook? The hammock is around the tree. That's tzidei. Here there's a basket that's on the tree. And l'chora, if the Chacham are referring to that, so that implies that the reason why they argue and they hold that the eruv is not an eruv is because you can't remove it. Why can you not remove it? You're not touching the tree. Is because they hold tzadadin asurin. And who cares if they hold tzadadin asurin? Really, we paskin taka that tzadadin are asurin. So Rashi, 2 lines under the Tosfos, all the way in the bottom, tells us that in Masechta Shabbos we have this discussion whether tzadadin are mutar or asur. If this is the machloikis between Rebbe and the Chachamim is the das rabbim, then that would have been a Tana, that would have been a work of Tanoim that the Gemara in Shabbos should have brought to prove that das rabbim, Chachamim, holds tzadadin are asurim. The fact that the Gemara in Shabbos that's discussing whether tzidei ilin is mutar or asur never brought this in, it must be that this is not Shitas Chachamim. So that's not what they are referring to. So back inside the Gemara, Elot must be that the Chachamim here are speaking about the Reisha. Now let's analyze the Braisa. Now let's not forget that Rebbe himself said that if it's Lamayla Masora, Ein Eruv Eruv. Now again, Hai Ilan, Hechidami. What type of tree are we referring to? If the tree doesn't have 4x4, right? Then makim peturu, and since it's a makim petur, then even if it's above 10, Rebbe, not the Chachamim, that even if it's above 10, why ein eruv eruv? Yeah, you can't take something from a reshus hayachid to a reshus harabim, but you can take something even midrabanan. You can take something from a makim petur into a reshus harabim. So that for sure is not the case of the Reisha, of the tree case. The Eid is by Arba'a, Ki Nesani Bekalkala. Let's understand Rebbe, let's understand the Rebbe. Why did Rebbe say that you can use it? My have, how does it help? What's over 10? Guys, before we go on, we already proved that the Chachamim hold that there is an isur, that even an isur midrabanan, I just want to speak it out, is problematic bein hashmashas. Because even before we conclude as to in which case is the Chachamim referring to, the fact that the Chachamim make a point to say that kol makim she'asur litloi ein eruvei eruv, kol makim she'asur ein eruvei eruv, just have that clear. That means the Chachamim are holding, we don't say, since the eruv, everyone holds the eruv only has to go into effect bein hashmashas. Now, if bein hashmashas ligazru bein mishum shvus, then the words of the Chachamim don't work, just to make that clear. So that's the Chachamim. They say if there's an isur, even only an isur midrabanan, then the eruv does not go into effect. So that's the source of the machlokes Rebbe and the Chachamim. Now what we need to understand is, we need to understand in what case are the Chachamim referring to, but to understand that, we have to understand the logic of the basket case before the Chachamim Rebbe. Why putting it on the basket, how does that help you? If it's lamayla miyud, like the Gemara asks, that if there is no 4 in the basket, if there's no 4 tvachim, it's a lakim toward the basket. Then why would the Chachamim argue? Then why would the Chachamim argue there should be no isur? And you can't say that they argue because the Chachamim hold against Sudadim. No, if that would have been the case, the Gemara and Shabbos would have brought it. The Chachamim don't have a problem with you being mishtamish with Sudadim. There's no tree issue over here. So what's the problem? So Amar Ravina. So we're gonna have 2 ways of understanding the basket case. Ravina over here and Avirmiya on daff lamed gimel lamed beis. So let's begin with the first answer. So Amar Ravina, Reisha beizbei arba'a. Case of the tree is there's 4. Has to be. The Brayso must be speaking about 5, which is why lamayla ma'asara, that's called a reshus hayachid. You can't transfer reshus hayachid to reshus harabim, right? Even if you're going to be mater a shvus, that's not a shvus, that's a isur d'oraisa, ein eruv. The case of the basket, yes, the leis bei arba'a, the tree itself doesn't have 4 by 4. The tree itself would have been a makim ptur, but the kalkala, the basket, mashli masay la arba'am, being that the basket is tied onto the tree, we view the basket and the tree at the point of their connection as one base, as one locale, and together they have 4 by 4. Hold on. Now it's very understandable. Let's go to daff lamed gimel. And 2 details. Number 1, Rebbe, the Tanach that says you can take it off the basket even though it's above 10, on one hand holds like Rabbi Meir. What does Rav Meir hold? That why would we give the basket a dimension of 4 by 4 if the basket doesn't have it? The basket doesn't have 4 by 4. The tree doesn't have 4 by 4. Elama, what are we saying? That, think about a keli, a basket. You have a basket. If this is not 4 by 4, but it's touching a tree, it's connected to a trunk. How does that add to the platform, to the inner the recipient of the basket? Number 1, it must be that we are subscribing to the shita of Rabbi Meir. Let's quickly chazer the case. When you have a doorway, if the doorway has 4 tfachim width, at least 10 tfachim height, only then are you mechuyev to put up a mezuzah. If you have mezuzah, it's in a mashkev. What happens if you have a doorway and at the base of the doorway there is 4 tfachim? But before it hits 10 tvachim, let's say when it hits 6 tvachim, 7 tvachim, it begins to arch. And therefore you don't have the width of 4 by 4 all the way up 10 tvachim. So Rabbi Meir is the one that says that we, so to say, since potentially you can knock out the arch, you can square the arch, and if there is enough wall that if you would do so, you would still have the wall, and you would have an entranceway through it that would be 4 in the width and 10 in the height. That's called choykekin, that we, so to say, halachically, we carve it out to get to the right shiur. So number 1, we are allowed to, even though the basket doesn't have 4 by 4, the tree also doesn't have 4 by 4, but at the point where they connect, we view that point as 4 by 4. Now, why do we need to do chayik and lahashlim before we come to the Mishnah? Because Rabbi holds like Rabbi Yehuda, as we'll speak out in a moment, that if you place an eruv on a b'makom she'en lo arba arba, since there is no chashivus to that b'chlal, the eruv is not valid. Now, here's the catch. Again, a very nuanced catch. The eruv, the food, is not on the place where the basket touches the tree. The basket touches the tree, but then, the basket has a clay kibble. There's where they're touched, they're tied together, where they're bound together, where it's hooked on the top, but then you have the platform of the basket. Rashi says that you have to remember the case we have in Shabbos, in Daf Kuf Aleph, regarding the boat. Now, what happens if you have a boat? Many boats, when they go into the water, like a canoe, they narrow down. So if you have a boat, that the deck of the boat has an area of 4x4, which would mean it would be at a shusayachid if the walls are 10. And the walls of the boat are 10 tvachim. But if it narrows down to less than 4x4, we don't give to the bottom of that boat the Reshus HaYachid classification. Even though the boat has an area where there's 4x4, but that's only above and not below. So we are mamish connecting the din of that boat to the din of the basket. Mitzad echad, to address Rabbi Yehuda's concern that if there's no dalad by dalad, it's bechlal, not an eruv. No, there is 4x4. How are there 4x4? Because we're using Rabbi Meir. Choykikim lahashlim at the place where they touch. But the eruv is placed in the bottom of the basket. Over there isn't 4x4. It's kavaldik. So we have the best of both worlds. What's the best of both worlds? Even though the basket is on top of 10 tvachim, since the food is on a place in the basket that doesn't have 4x4, we can still argue that that is not a Reshus HaYachid. And therefore, you are allowed to take it down. Now, you're not allowed to take it down. You are allowed to take it down. Let's read it inside. But Meir, again, the top line. And Rebbe will hold both like Rav Meir and like Rabbi Yehuda. So like Rav Meir, the Amar, Choykikim lahashlim. And guys, let's read inside the top Rashi. From the top of the Amid, the some like Rav Meir, the Amid Gabi Kippah, the Perikama, Choykikim, Kippah's that is that arch doorway, Choykikim lahashlim. Umiyu, however, just because we say Choykikim lahashlim, it does not mean that we give it a bona fide classification of a Reshus HaYachid, because then the kash of the Gemara is going to come back. If the basket is a Reshus HaYachid and the person is kind of shvisa at the base of that tree, right? It's Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabbi. Says Rashi, the second line, Umiyu, Reshus HaYachid Gemara lo yahave. Why? Because even the ain b'chati chasoy shel ilan rachav dalid. At the end of the day, there isn't a mamash of 4. Afal gav the beroishoy rachav arba'a. Right, beroishoy means in the place where the basket touched the tree. That is where you say choykikim lahashlim. The chalkola mashlim al asara. Still lo yahave Reshus HaYachid. Ela imkein maschil liyois rachvay arba mitoch gimel asmucham lakarka. And he brings the story again of the boat. In other words, if it would have been wide, if the basket would not even have had 3 tefachim depth, then we would say that the top 4 automatically goes down to the bottom. But the basket is deeper than 3 tefachim or more. And therefore, the basket is not a Reshus HaYachid. And that explains why we are allowed, according to Rebbe, to take it down. Givaldik. And the third line in the Amid, why do we have to bechlal subscribe to Choykikim lahashlim? The Amar be'inan eruv she al gabe makim arba v'leke. But since we view the basket that it is as if it has 4, to address Rabbi Yehuda because of Rav Meir. On the other hand, it's not a Reshus HaYachid Gemura, and since it's not a Reshus HaYachid Gemura, therefore Rebbe holds that we are allowed to rely on that eruv, and it is on that case that the Chachamim say Kol Makom she'asur litloi ein eruvei eruv. Why would they hold ein eruvei eruv? Because they would hold that midrabanan, you can't get it both ways. On a rabbinic level, on a shvus level, if you're going to view this as a Reshus HaYachid, so it's not a Reshus HaYachid Gemura, but it's still midrabanan, you can't take it from the basket to down to the ground, which is a Reshus HaRabim. And Rebbe also holds you can't do it midrabanan, but it comes back that that's the machlekes Rebbe in the Rabbanan, that Rebbe doesn't care if there's an Isur Shvus. It doesn't affect an Eruv, because the Eruv Tchumen only goes into effect. Bein HaShmashis, Masha'en Kenachacham, they argue with Rebbe, if something may not be done halachically, it disqualifies the Eruv, this may not be done with the Rabbanan, and therefore they argue with Rebbe that that such an Eruv is not valid. Okay. Now the Gemara says, my Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that no'atz koira b'reshus harabim, if you will insert a beam in Reshus HaRabim, now the beam doesn't have 4x4, it can be very tall, so like this, if Gevaya Yud v'Rechava Daled, so then the din will be Eruvai, Eruv. Now, why do we say Eruvai, Eruv? Why do we say Eruvai, Eruv? Why isn't this a Reshus HaYachid? Why isn't this a Reshus HaYachid? Zok Rashi. Look inside the Rashi. It's still in the narrow parts. Hachi Garsin and Gevaya sort of Rechava Daled Eruvai Eruvai. V'im Lav Ein Eruvai Eruvai. Gevaya Yud Rechava Arba Eruvai Eruvai. Afal Gav says Rashi. Hold on. If it's wide 4x4 and tall 10, the Reshus HaYachid Hach Koira. And Vahu Nischaven Lishvois B'Reshus HaRabim. So now we have to remember. So when you learn the sugya, you get stuck here. So Rashi says, no, you forgot Rava. It's mamash moededik. What did we learn yesterday's shiur? That Rava holds that if you are placing an eruv on a reshus hayachid midoraisa, but you are under it, even though you are in a reshus harabim midoraisa, based on the rule of Rava. That first of all, what did Rava say? When you count 2,000 amas from your eruv, you don't count it from your basket of food. You don't count it from your feet. First, you get dalad amas. And then from the periphery of the dalad amas, you count the 2,000 amas. And again, just to remind ourselves, there's a machlokes, whether it is you have 2 amas in each direction, a total of 4x4, or is it 4 amas in each direction? Be that as it may, that area is considered regarding Eruvin as if a Reshus HaYachid. And without that, you can't understand this. So yeah, we're not speaking about the branch that goes horizontal. There's no branches. It's not a tree. It's a con. It's a beam. A beam has no branches. So now we understand what we're learning over here, back inside the Baraisa of Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, if it's a Eruvei Eruv, but the imlav ain't Eruvei Eruv. Now the problem is, why would that be? Why would that be? If it's not, let's say, if it's not tall 10 tfachim, then it should for sure be good, because then it's in your same reshus. So asks the Gemara, how do you understand that v'im lav ein eruvei eruv? Adarabah, hu ve'eruvai b'makim echad. If the im lav means instead of it being above 10, it's below 10, avad it should be good. Ella, the pshat of this Baraisa of Rabbi Yehuda is Gavoya asara sarich sheyehi b'rosh arba. Ein Gavoya asara, then ein sarich sheyehi b'rosh arba. If the beam is not 10 tfachim tall, so since the reshus of the Reshus HaRabim goes up 10 tfachim, even Rabbi Yehuda will hold, I don't care that it's not 4x4 because you place it in the Reshus HaRabim. But the moment it's above 10, here we have the din of Rabbi Yehuda that if it doesn't have 4x4, since Bechlal this is called a makim ptur, which means it's not a makim chashuv, the whole eruv is not valid to begin with. The whole eruv is not valid to begin with. And that's all explaining why the basket case, Rebbe, right, has to follow Rabbi Meir. Choykikim lahashlim. Without the choykikim lahashlim, then you don't have, then the eruv is not valid. Choykikim lahashlim allows you to give it 4x4. It's above 10 tfachim. Mitzat sheni, that was the whole vart. It's only choykikim lahashlim at the place where the basket touches the tree. But in the inside of the basket where you place the food, that is not a Reshus HaYachid. And since Rebbe holds that it's only now a shvus to take it down, because then, and by the way, the basket case, just to make it clear, must be like the tree case, which is, it's not only about above or below 10, it's also far, it's beyond 4 amas. Just remember that, because the moment you don't have this detail of it being outside your dalad amas, it's always going to be a good eruv. And now we have one more thing that we have to cover. before we all in Ravina. And that is like this. If there is a place in the basket where it touches the tree, because of choikikim lahashlim, that area is 4x4, Eloma, the basket as it goes down, it's not connected to the tree. So there's no more choikikim lahashlim. So the top is 4x4. The lower part of the basket is not 4x4. Where you place the food, it's not the reshus hayachid. But we learned the din of gudachis. Gudachis means is that when you have walls up there, then you halachically you make them you bring them down. You bring them down. Why would and if we would say gudachis, then it does have then all of it the choikikim lahashlim should all come down. Then you have 4x4. If you have 4x4, then Vaita will be troubled. How can Rebbe say that if the basket is l'mayla masara tvachim, even though it's l'mayla eruvei eruv, why in reshus hayachid you are in a reshus harabim? So does that mean that this Rebbe does not subscribe to gudachis? Now who do we attribute explicitly gudachis to the Tanach Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda? Asks the Gemara, is Kaman the like Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda? The Tanya Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda, no, it's kone. If you have a reed, and here we're not saying a beam, here we're saying dafka reed, because a reed, there is no reed by nature that has 4x4 tfachim, unlike a beam. No, it's kind of a reshus harabim. But on the top of the reed, you put a basket. The basket has 4x4, and you are standing in the reshus harabim, for example, and you throw something in the basket. And the Zorik Benachal Gabov, Chayv means Chayv Chatas. Chayv Chatas means that you made a biblical transference. Why is that? Because you took something from a reshus. You took something from a reshus harabim, where you're standing, and it landed in a reshus hayachid. Hold, 1 second. How is the basket in a reshus hayachid? Yes, a normal basket has 4x4, but a basket doesn't have mechitzos that are 10 tfachim. The basket does not have mechitzos gavois 10 tefachim. Now, the basket physically is way above 10 tefachim from the ground, but the reed is very skinny. The mechitzos are only in the top. Eloma, the answer is that since there is one place on the top where there is a wall coming down, the basket walls, we say halachically it goes down until the ground. Gudach is mechitzah. So coming back over here, if we go with Rav Meir, choikikim lahashlim, which means in the place where the basket is tied onto the tree, there, between the basket and the tree, you have 4x4. If we were to subscribe to gudachis, then it would go down all the way to the ground, including the place in the basket where the food is laying. That's daled by daled. That's reshus hayachid. Then how can Rebbe say that l'mayla miyud eruvei eruv? So here the Gemara gives a very important answer. It's something that we mentioned a few times already. And that is, my friends, that to put together two dinim, and we're speaking about halacha l'moshe misinais, and this is really even an halacha l'maisa debate amongst the poskim, can we put together two halacha l'moshe misinais? Certainly this would be the pshat of those who say that you cannot, they will bring this as their raya. Yeah, you're telling me two dinim. Choikikim lahashlim is also as a halacha. You don't have 4x4. No, it's as if that when you take the basket and the tree together, you have 4x4. And then so number one, you have to do choikikim lahashlim. And now you're going to take that and say good achis. You're not allowed to do two things together. So answers the Gemara that no afilu teima Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda. Over there, Hassan, hadran mechitzah, the mechitzas themselves surround the reed. You have physical mechitzas, dalid by dalid, around the reed. All you need to do is, you don't have to make a choikikim lahashlim. You have to, do you do good achis? Do you not do good achis? With all the pratim, there's gediyim boikim boy, maybe because it's around the reed, so the gediyim don't go through the reed, maybe that it takes away. Whatever the issues are, at least you're starting out with real mechitzas. Over here, loy hadron mechitzah, meaning there aren't 4x4 mechitzas. You don't, even on the top of the basket, you don't have actual mechitzas. Choikikim lahashlim. Choikim lahashlim and gudachas zusammen is something that we do not do. So this is the first explanation. This is Ravina's explanation in the basket case. But the ikar is that the Chachamim who argue with Rebbe, their argument is based on the concept that even though there is only an Isur Midrabanan, nevertheless, since you can't violate Isser Midrabanan, even Ben Hashmashos, it disqualifies the effectiveness of the Eruv, and therefore the Mishnah that we learned before, and that we're going to see if the next Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled will fit with that. There'll be a big issue with that, but it will only work if we follow Shitas Rebbe. Guys, we're going to stop over here because Rav Yirmiyah is going to go way into Daf Lamed Daled, and now we're going to have the next answer explaining the basket case to be continued. All right. Yeah, guys, it's good. It's good. Just very technical.
Thank you for all the explanations.
All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Lamed Daled. We are in the heart of the sugya of placement of an Eruv Techumen, where there might be a halachic problem taking the Eruv Techumen during Bein Hashmashos. Certain cases the Eruv will be qualified. There's a lot of leniencies, but then we have other scenarios and other Tanoim that will disqualify the Eruv. If you may not actually access it halachically, even during Bein Hashmashos. We had a Mishnah, which is the case of the Ilan. We had a very similar case in a Braisa, but the Braisa gave a chiddush that if the Eruv was placed in a basket, that's l'mayla ma'asara tvachim, that the Rebbe holds that the Eruv will be an Eruv, unlike the case of the tree, that if it's placed l'mayla ma'asara tvachim with all the details, ein Eruv Eruv, and we're trying to figure out how can Rebbe make such a statement. And we had in the last daf the Vina's explanation of the basket case, and we're going to start, I think it's 6 lines from the bottom of the Amid, explaining Rav Yirmiyah's case of the Ben. Now, just to give a little bit of an intro, we're going to have various Gavaldic cases. What happens if there's 2 days back-to-back where you need an Eruv Techumen? And the rabbinic prohibition, according to most opinion rabbinic, that you cannot walk beyond 2,000 amas if you don't place an Eruv, isn't only on Shabbos, it's also on Yom Tov. So if you have Friday going into Shabbos, like if you have Shabbos going into Sunday, that means you have 2 days in which you need to have an Eruv Techumen. You cannot place an Eruv, and it's going to work for both days, because maybe the Eruv won't be there, especially if you're placing it b'Reshus HaRabbim. Now on Yom Tov you are allowed to carry, so it's much easier there's a much easier solution. So let's say it's Yom Tov and then Shabbos. So Thursday I'm going to send the shliach to place an Eruv. My shliach is going to have to wait there during Bein Hashmashos. Then the shliach can take it back. And then he'll go back there Friday before Shabbos when you're allowed to carry and leave it there Bein Hashmashos. And then whether the Eruv will remain b'mitzias or whether it's going to be eaten up or destroyed, I don't care. It was in its place. When it comes Shabbos, Sunday, it's a lot more difficult, because if you're going to place the Eruv there on Friday, which means before Shabbos, and it has to be there Bein Hashmashos, now you're not allowed to carry. See, Yom Tov you are allowed to carry. So we're going to get into such scenarios. How would you place an Eruv? We're going to review a Gavaldic law, still when it comes to Ha'itzah that we learned in Shabbos, that when one is biblically not a carry Shabbos, if an item was fully resting in one domain, and you on Shabbos made an Akira and a Hanocha in another domain, or Daladamas b'Reshus HaRabbim. But what happens if you have an article that's resting, let's say, in a Reshus HaRabbim or in a Reshus HaYachid, but that article is tied to a rope? You are holding the rope when you're standing in the other domain, which means the entire time you had the easy potential of schlepping it towards you. Even though it was physically resting, on the biblical level, that item is not fully resting, because part of it was in your hand. Even though not the article was in your hand, the rope that was connected to the article, enough for us to say on a biblical level that there wasn't a proper rest, And therefore, if you were to take it, it's taka asan midrabanan, but there's no iser doiraisa. And as we are learning our sugya, that our entire sugya is following Shitas Rebbe, that says that if the issue of transferring is only because of a shvus, certainly when it comes to an eruv techumen, and our halacha, that if you may not get the eruv techumen halachically, it invalidates it. No, bein hashmashas, we're not concerned for a shvus, and in certain scenarios, it will not invalidate. It will not invalidate an eruv. We're going to have some cases of kalayim, very interesting cases of kalayim, and God willing, we'll begin on daf lamed dalid amud beis, a whole new part of the sugya. It's similar, but it's not the same. From daf lamed beis amud beis until the second Mishnah, daf lamed dalid amud beis, the issue was if I cannot access my eruv halachically. Now on daf lamed dalid amud beis, we'll start a new sugya, similar but different. What happens if there's no halachic issue, but there is a gashmias, there's a physical, technical issue that you cannot access your eruv? One case will be of the Mishnah, that you place your eruv in a cabinet. The cabinet has a door with a lock, and it's locked, and you lost the key. So if you were to want to eat the eruv bein hashmashas, you can't get to it. Don't tell me break the cabinet. Guys, breaking a cabinet is asan midoraisa. It's called stira, right? Binyan and stira. And by the way, that's going to lead us into daf lamed hey. Yesh binyan v'stira b'kelim, ein binyan v'stira b'kelim. Again, we're having a great opportunity of chazeting many halachis of Eitzah here in Masechtas Eruvin. Now, we're going to start on daf lamed gimel amud beis, 6 lines before the bottom of the amid. Ravina, we're not rejecting Ravina's explanation, but well, there's a lot of chedushim there, as we explained. But here, Ravina Amar like this: another innovation, another leniency, explaining why Rebbe allows us to take it off the basket. Shani kalkolom hoyil v'yochol in toisa ula haviyel toichasara. The case of the Braisa isn't that the basket was l'mayla ma'asara tvachim, but how much above? I don't care how high up. It can be a mile up in the air. No. It was a little bit above 10 tvachim. Now, if it would have been on a branch, so it is where it is. When it's placed in a basket, the basket, not like the last sugya Ravina, the way we learned in the last year, the basket is 4x4 or more. But you, because of it being in a basket that's very flexible, you are able to tilt the basket. Now think about that. If you have food in the basket now, all of it is in a Reshus HaYachid because it's above 10 Tfachim. What happens if you were to tilt it or to lean it to the side, and the food will roll down to the lower part of the basket now? And now, after you tilt it, the lower part of the basket is under 10 Tfachim. What status would that lower part of the basket have? Interesting. It would have a din of a karmelis. Now again, midrabanan, you're not allowed to transfer from a Reshus HaYachid into a karmelis. But as we have been explaining, yeah, the Chachamim argue with all this. That's the source. But Rebbe, who holds that anything that's usher only because of a shvus, loy gazer all of Chachamim bein hashmashos, again, that's the reason why it will be permitted. Wow. Bazakula. Again, hoyel means not that you have to do it. Since there is a way of only breaking a rabbinic rule, therefore, and then there's no issue bein hashmashos, therefore, even though it's Lamayla Masada, Rebbe in the Braisa, and Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph says the eruv is an eruv. Yosef Rav Papa, and the Ka'amar Lo Hashmaitz is repeating this chiddush of Rabbi Yirmiyah, his insight, his explanation of the Tana, of the Braisa, and Eisvei Rav Bar Sheva to Rav Papa. This concept of, since there is a potential, it's okay, it's already okay. Oh, we learned in a Mishnah, again, the cases like we spoke about in our introduction, Yom Tov is on Friday. Dafke, that's the case of the Mishnah. Yom Tov is on Friday, going into Shabbos. If the person himself is going to be walking to the new Makom HaShvisa, you don't need any food, b'chal. The person who wants to make use of the Eruv Tchumen, for whatever reason, is not going there. So now he has to send food in the hand of a shliach, and like we mentioned, for the shliach, and he wants to use it both days, Friday Yom Tov and Shabbos. You can't just leave it there. Certainly in a case where you're putting it b'reshus harabim, where maybe an animal will eat it up, maybe a person will eat it up. It might not be there. How can you rely on it on Shabbos? So what do? since Friday going into Shabbos, the advantage is that on Yom Tov you are allowed to carry. So good. You go there the first day. The first day means Thursday afternoon. And the shliach has to be there throughout Bein Hashmashos. But then the shliach takes him back. And ubaloi means he goes back home. And then the last line in the Amit. Then Basheni is not, he's putting it for Shabbos, but he's putting it before Shabbos. It's still Friday. It's still Yom Tov. You're allowed to carry. So he can wait to go back there. Mashechalov. Now it's Shabbos Kodesh. Now you're not allowed to carry. But you know what, my friends? I don't need for the Eid of Techumen to be be'en for the whole Shabbos. I don't need that to happen. As long as we know it was there during Bein Hashmashos, it's going to work for the whole day. So what do you do with it? So the Mishnah says that if he wants, he can even eat it there. Obviously, we're speaking about that the owner understands that, but the owner understands that because what's the alternative? For him to leave it hefker in the veld over there, it's going to be destroyed anyway. So if he wants the oichloi, ubaloi. Okay. Now asks the Gemara, Amai. Why do you look at this as a weird question? It's like from the left field. Now it's a left field question. If you allow to say that hoil is going to be used, since potentially, right, the basket is lamay lamayud, but since you could tilt it, you can make one part of the basket into a caramelis, even though it was not tilted. During Bein Hashmashos, there was no caramelis here. Hoil, why don't we apply hoil to the ganze eruv? Why don't we say that no shliach ever has to take any food anywhere? You have to have the food. You have to have the halachic potential of getting there. But as long as you are able to walk with the food to the place where you want to put the Eid of Tchumen, don't even go there. We're speaking here the first day. So it should be considered Kemanda Amtia Dame. This whole idea of hoyel or ro'u, tak is a very up in the air. So you don't have to do it. Potentially it could be done. If you potentially, you can tilt potentially I can be sitting in my house. I'm your shliach. As long as I have the food, and as long as, let's say, Thursday, I can avad the walk there. I can go there. Even Friday, I should never have to go there b'poil. So Amar Rav Zera, you're right. If not for one case, which ruins it for all cases, we Taka would have said that as long as the shliach has the food in his domain, so all that is needed is for him to take it there. We would Taka say, since hoyel the iboya amtoye, it's valid. But there is one scenario in which he is not even in potential able to bring the aid over there. And what is that case? If an Eid of Techumen needs to be placed for Sunday Yom Tov, and when does it have to be placed? From the Bein Hashmashos going into Yom Tov, which is Shabbos. Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry. Here, there isn't a potential of you bringing the food there because of the halachic restraint. You're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. If we would never have to bring the eruv to a physical place, people would forget in this one scenario. And they would say, oh, as long as someone, the shliach, as long as someone has the food, so then the eruv is effective. All you need is for the owner to intend to be koine shavisa at that location. Now, in that case, it would not be effective. And people would forget. So you know what Chazal said? Every single time you want to use an Eid of Techumen, you have to walk in there physically. Moiridik. Esrei, fragt die Gemara, das Akash against Rav Yirmiyah, says in a Braisa, Neschaven lishvais b'reshus harabim. This is similar to the case of the Mishnah of the tree. This is similar to the case of Daf Lamed Gimel of the basket. We have to use all of the nuances that you want to take in your makim shvisa in a reshus harabim. There is a wall that has to be beyond your 4 amas. Don't forget Shitas Rava. That Rava says that if you're putting your eruv within your 4 amas, even though you are in a halachic reshus harabim, and you're putting it on a part of the wall that's above 10 tfachim, that has a din of a reshus hayachid, even though you may not take it down midoiraisa. But as far as eruv tchumen is concerned, we view your dalet by dalet like a reshus hayachid, and therefore who the eruva is in the same domain. So here again, there is a wall right outside 4 amos. So here again, the Braisa differentiates between Lamaila and Lamata. Lamata masara tfachim eruv eruv. If it's Lamaila miyut tfachim, ein eruv eruv, because it's not halachically accessible. And I just want to point out something that Tosfos brings up, which will give a lot of tam to the whole sugya. When you're putting something in a wall, don't argue. Remember the whole thing about the kalkala doesn't have 4x4. It's called choyrei reshus hayachid, which means that if you have a wall, not a basket on a tree, a wall, if the wall has the top of the wall is 4x4, any part of the wall that's above 10 tfachim is called choyrei reshus hayachid. Makes no difference whether the actual location, you don't even need choykikim lahashlam. It's called reshus hayachid. That's how we learned to Masechta Shabbos. So the Midrash says, if you put it above 10 tfachim, again, if you are far more than 4 amos away, if you are within 4 amos, then we got the Rava set it. What happens if you intend to be kind of shvisa on top of a duff cut, in other words, in a reshus hayachid itself, or b'reish hamigdal on top of a closet? So says the Braisa, whether that shoivach, whether that migdal is lamayla miyut tfachim eruv eruv. Why eruv eruv? Because you are, if you intended to take in Shabbos on top, you are in a reshus hayachid, right? Reshus hayachid. 1 second, my friends, you are 4 amos away. Upa, we keep on saying you're 4 amos away. So if I'm on top of a shoivach, I'm in a reshus hayachid, and I'm putting the eruv on the wall of ma'ila miyut tfachim. So what will happen? You're taking the eruv from one reshus hayachid, you're bringing it to your reshus hayachid. But what happens if you're taking it through the airspace of reshus harabim? Even if that were to happen, not a problem, because transferring from a reshus hayachid to a reshus hayachid derech reshus harabim is only asur midrabanan. No, I take that back. If you're lamayla miyud and you put it on the wall lamayla miyud, you're not even taking it through that reshus harabim. Machlal, there's no problem. It's from reshus hayachid to reshus hayachid. But if you place the eruv lamata miyud tvachim, if it's lamata miyud tvachim, ein eruv eruv. Why ein eruv eruv? Because where is the eruv right now? The eruv right now is a lamata miyut tfachim, is considered choyrei reshus harabim. It's in a reshus harabim. You intend to take in Shabbos on top of a closet. You are in a reshus hayachid, so you can't take the eruv from a reshus harabim to a reshus hayachid. Hold on, I got a problem over here. What's my problem? Just like Rabbi Yirmi allows you to tilt the basket in which the eruv is placed. Here we're not tilting the wall. You can't tilt the wall. But here you're tilting yourself. If you are on top of a closet, why can you not tilt the closet? That you should bring yourself down and no longer be in reshus hayachid. If you are on top of a closet that has 4x4, but now the top of the closet is under yutfachim, that's a karmelis. Oh. So even though the eruv is going to be in the choyrei reshus harabim, but taking from a reshus harabim into our karmelis is only in isur d'rabbanan. Why would that be a problem? Why do we say lamata if the top of the shoivach is lamata? Let's use Rabbi Yirmiya's logic. You can tilt a closet, and you can tilt it and bring it within 10 tfachim, making it into a karmelis. And as we keep on learning our sugya, that would already take that would validate the eruv. That would validate the effectiveness of the eruv. This question came to Rabbi Yirmiyah himself. And Rabbi Yirmiyah must be, I stand my ground, that we're speaking about a migdal or a shoivach that's mesuma, that's nailed in it's affixed in its location. Just like you cannot tilt a wall, you cannot tilt it. Because if there is the potential to tilt it, we can use hoyo potential to validate the Eruv. Rabbi says, I accept Rabbi Yirmiyah Seter, and I don't even have to zet sign the Braisa in such a limited case. Rabbi Amar, afilu tenu b'migdal she'ena masuma. Nor was then that v'hacha b'migdal aruch haskinon, it's very, very tall, and therefore, the moment you start tilting it, you're gonna, if it's very tall, forget about the fact that it's far away from the wall for Amos. Forget about that detail. I'm going to another detail. For you to tilt something and bring it down from above Asara to Lamata Asara, the taller you are, the more space you need to tilt it. If you are very much high up, then to tilt it, to bring it down Lamata Asara, you're going to travel another 4 Amos. Weiter 4 Amos. And yes, the way the Maram spoke out, you remember we learned 2 daf ago that even though there are cases in which we say, the case of our Mishnah, that even though when you bring it down the tree, it's still more than 4 amos away from you. But you can carry it pachos midalit. Yes, it's also midrabanan, but we don't care about shvusin over here. That's if the only heter you need is to say carry it less and less than 4. We can rely on that. But over here, there are many other issues. First, you have to tilt it. You have to put together these 2 things together. Putting together, like we learned in the last daf, we don't put together good achis and chokikim lahashlam. Here, we have to first make, as if, since you could tilt it, you did not tilt it. You are right now in a reshus hayachid. So you have to subscribe to one thing. And that you're going to carry it less than 4 by 4. We don't put all these things together. That since imam play purta, azul chuslaba amis, and therefore, again, we don't put together that potential as if it's taka lamata. You're not lamata. You're arin at a shusayachid. You're kind of shvis and a shusayachid. That and this 2 things together and saying that since you can carry it pachos midalid, we don't combine these 2 aterim together, which is why the Braisa says that it will not be a valid eruv. And now we have one final nuance in the Braisa before we move on and we go on to the second case in the Mishnah, the Amid Beis, which is the case of the pit. That becomes very easy to understand. And that is as follows, like we spoke on in the introduction. Even in a scenario where your eruv is in the Choyrei Reshus HaRabim, and you are, let's say, L'mayla Miyud, you are in a Reshus HaYachid. If there would have been a rope tied around the food, which would have been in the hand of the person who placed the eruv during Bein HaShmashes, that in itself would validate the eruv. Because then, since all of these scenarios is following Shitas Rebbe, that anything that's only because of a shvuz, like Gazer, all of Bein HaShmashes, something that's resting in one domain, and another person who's in another domain is connected to that item via a rope, if he were to drag it to himself, he's not violating a biblical act of Eitzah. And the Gemara presents it with a kasha neteret. Says the Gemara, hey Chidami, what will be the case even over here? And the question of the Gemara is so good, especially, this really goes on all of our cases. On the tree case and on the basket case, we keep on saying that the person is more than 4 amos away from it. Because if you are within 4 amos, even if it's Lamayla Miyud, Rava, it's a good eruv. So you're far away. So the Ika Kafta Umasnam. Kafta means if there's a window in this migdal where you are kind of shvisa. And Rashi says it doesn't have to be a window. If you are on top of it, you don't need a window. That means that if you have physical accessibility to the food, umasna means a rope. So the kasha is, Laisa bekafta umasna, you should be allowed to take it via the rope, even though midrabanan you may not do so, but if you were to schlep it, as long as the rope was already in your hand when Shabbos came in, that means that that item was not fully resting in its place. It's only an Isser D'Rabbanan, which we don't care about for Erev Tchumim. So it must be that in all of these scenarios, the lace lay kafto masna. There's no easy accessibility. There's no rope connected, and therefore, in the cases where one is in Reshus Hayachid Gemura and one is in a Reshus Harabim Gemura, that is where we say Ein Eruvai Eruv. And now the Gemara is referring back to the second case in Daf Lamed Beis and Beis in the Mishnah, that if you place the Eruv beboyer, even though the boyer is deep 100 amas, the Eruv is an Eruv. And here the Gemara is going to ask that the Nesani beboyer afil amek mea ama, it's valid. High boyer hechi koi. Hold on. If the boyer is in a reshus hayachid, in other words, he was intending to take in Shabbos at the edge of the boyer, so the boyer is a reshus hayachid, and he is in a reshus hayachid. Daf Lamed Dalid Amid Beis, then Pshita that the Eruv is going to be valid because Rishus HaYachid Oila Ad L'Rokia, when the Mishnah says even if the boy is 100 amas deep, yeah, you're taking it from a Rishus HaYachid and to your Rishus HaYachid. That just like if you're beginning on the ground, the Rishus HaYachid goes up Ad L'Rokia, not like a Rishus HaRabam that only goes up to 10 Tvachim. So Gemara asks that the chihecha the salka le'el, just like a reshus hayachid goes up all the way to the heavens, it goes all the way down. In other words, even though the boat is 100 amas deep, and the Eruv is placed in the bottom of the pit, but the whole pit is one reshus hayachid. You are in a reshus hayachid. Elot must be that the pit is in a reshus harabim. So now let's clarify. So where did you intend to decline a shvisa? If Lamaila means at the edge of the pit, so how is this different than the case of the tree? If you intend to be kind of shvisa in the pit itself, then who needs the din of the Mishnah? Pshita. Answers the Gemara, that the case is that the pit is in a carmelis, and you intend to take in Shabbos not in the pit. It's very symmetric now, not on the branch. You're taking it at the base of the tree, at the base of the pit. And why is an Eruv? Rishus hayachid the carmelis is also b'drabanan, so this continues to follow the shita that Rebbe Hido Amar that called over shum mishum shvus legazru all of bein hashmoshois. All right, now this Mishnah is still the same sugya. The next Mishnah changes the halachic to a technical or to a physical inaccessibility, but we're not there yet. Says the first Mishnah on the Flamanal base. Neshamot, if you place the Eruv, the on top of a reed, or on top of a pole, as long as this kone was first disconnected and now inserted in the ground. Afilu the vayakufama, even if it's 100 amas tall, hareze eruv, it is a valid eruv. Why is it a valid eruv? Because since just the definition of a kana, always when you hear kana, not a tree could be 4, could be less than 4, right? A kana is little, it's not 4 by 4, not 4 by 4, not 4 by 4 meant that it's not a reshus hayachid. If it's not in a reshus hayachid, even though you are in a reshus harabim, again, this is a hemshach, the shitas Rebbe, like we just had above the Gemara, okay, now we got a problem. What's our problem? Why did the Mishnah have to speak about a kana that was tolush v'nodes? Yes, my friends, I know that midrabanan, you cannot be mishtamish be'ilan. A reed that's connected is like a tree, but we don't care about that right now. So that we'll have to address it. Says the Gemara. Rami lei Rav Ada bar Masna Rav. The Mishnah says tolush v'nodes only then, since it's a makom ptur, since it's not a reshus hayachid, then the eruv is an eruv. But that implies that loy tolush v'nodes, the reed is in its natural place. Then loy, why loy? Because asal ishtamish be'ilan. But then you're telling me mani rabbanani that would only fit l'rabbanan. The amri called davar shum mishum shvus gazer all bein hashmoshes. Now, by the way, here, as far as the transference is concerned, there isn't even an Isur D'Rabbanan, just to make that clear. Because when you're taking something from a makom ptur, which is the top of this reed, to a reshus harabim, there isn't even an Isur D'Rabbanan. Which is why if it's tolush, then no, it's even if the Mishnah can follow the Chachamim, the Eruv will be an Eruv. But how can it be? The whole Mishnah, the Flamed Beis, Amid Beis, Reisha Rebbe. So Reisha Rebbe is Sefer Rabbanan, which is something not ideal, but there's no Bereda here. So Amar Lei, indeed, this question is not new. Kvar Rami Lei Rami Bar Chama to Rab Chizda, and Rab Chizda's only solution was V'shani Lei Reish Rebbe V'Sefer Rabbanon. However, Ravina has a Gavaldik Chiddush. Ravina Amar, no, Kula Rebbe. Kula Rebbe. He's giving a practical difference. When you're telling me, don't be mishtamesh be'ilan, how did that begin? It began because you're not allowed to climb up a tree. Climbing up a tree, there's a high chance you're gonna break off a twig. So then he went further. Don't only not climb a tree, don't use a tree. Oh, hold on, we have trees. If I'm gonna put a little pekele on my tree, I'm gonna hide my key from my door on the tree in front of my house. I'm not climbing the tree. I'm not gonna crack anything. If I'm gonna put something on it, I might lean on it. It's already a stretch. Even though using a reed is taka'os midrabanan, but the likelihood, a reed is very delicate, that if you're going to put something on the reed, if you don't exactly take it off or put it on the right way, you will break the reed. Now, breaking a connected reed is an isur deoraisa. Ravina holds, even though Rebbe normally says that anything that's only also mishum shvus is not shaykh to invalidate an eruv because the eruv's validity is only connected to ben hashmashos, he doesn't say that by a reed, because a reed will crack. It's amazing. It's a bigger chashash. So here we cannot be mishtamish in a reed if the reed is connected. So even though the Mishnah is Rebbe, it has to be that it was talush v'nones. Story. It says the Gemara, Hahu Bul Musa. There was a large army unit that came to the city of Nardah. And the city became ungepackt with soldiers. And Rav Nachman, who wanted to give a shiur on Shabbos, understood that their normal place of gathering will be too busy. So he wanted to teach outside of Nardah. And there was a potential concern, as we'll see in a moment, and he wanted to resolve it before Shabbos. So Amar Rav Nachman to his chaver, to his talmidim, that Puku, please go out and avidu kevushe kavshe ba'agma. Go make a place out there in the marsh by pressing down all the reeds. Now, in other words, he was going to be teaching on top of reeds, and he wanted to make sure that they prepared that location in order that lomachar nezel v'nesav ilovayu, for us to be able tomorrow to go and sit over there without breaking some rule. Now, what's the issue here? So, Esvei Rami Bar Chama to Rav Nachman, or other people have a version that Rav Ukva, but Abba asked Rav Nachman from our Mishnah, what exactly could you do before Shabbos that will resolve your worry about the reeds in the marsh? It says in our Mishnah, only Talush v'notes, then is the Eruv valid. Like Talush v'notes, the Eruv is not valid. They understood that all he told us that the reeds over there by Nardah, they were not, he didn't tell them to disconnect them. All he told them is to make sure that they're pressed well together, to designate a location. Why? He should have told them, cut them off the ground. And now we're saying that a reed is much more practically close to violating koitzer because it's just a reed. So right away, Rav Nachman answered that Hassan, meaning our Mishnah, is be'uzuradin, they were hard. A hard reed is something that if you tilt it, if you lean on it, you're going to crack it. By the marsh, the reeds were very soft. There was no chashash. It's like, I'll tell you, we can walk on grass. How can you walk on grass? Now, first of all, by the way, even if grass ends up getting uprooted, that's a davar she'ein chavin, you're not violating anything. Maybe it's different. It's not a tree. So the reeds in our Mishnah was like a tree. And our story, there was no isur, there was no fear. Uminat timra, that there is a halachic difference between uzuradin, which means hardened reeds, which will have dinoi ki ilan, and worse when it comes to the isur of hishtamshus be'ilan. L'she'enai uzuradin, which was the case of Nardah, the Tanya. And this braisa, this tosefta is beneged kalayim. Kalayim is an isur doiraisa to plant greens or grains, or even vegetables together with a vineyard. But you know what? One is allowed to plant in a vineyard trees. So says the Mishnah, says the Tosefta, Hakonin reeds. Atodin is a certain type of bush. and another bush called higin v'ha-higin. Since the Braisa classifies these three as a min ilon, and an ilon is allowed to be planted in a kedem, and therefore ve'einam kalayim b'kedem. However, we learned in another Braisa, hakonim, reeds, viter reeds, that's the stira, and the hakedon or hakidon in English is called cassia. It's a certain type of cinnamon bark, and the urbanim, they are classified as a yerek, as a vegetable, and therefore in kalayim b'kedem. Now, the overlap is from konim. Is konim a min ilan or is it a min yerek? So kashadodi elo shmamino. This is the raya that Rav Nachman is bringing, that kan be'uzradim. Itaka has a din of an ilan, also lakula. You can plant it in a kedem. And kan, with the second brayso calls it min yerek, is kshe'en uzradim. And like we mentioned, if you have a yerek greens or something, that there's no koitzer issue. Whatever issue was, it was. Rav Nachman resolved by Erev Shabbos what the Talmidim did, but there's no issue of Ishtamshus Ve'il. Now that we
Rabbi, didn't we just get done finishing explaining that the reed, they were worried about you breaking it on Shabbos and having kosher, but now it sounds like Rav Nachman was saying that the reed we were talking about before is hard, and only the one by
hard. No, hard means that it's going to break. Fakert, something hard breaks. Don't be kosher kekanan. That's the Mishnah Pirkei Avos. Hard means you'll break. If it's very soft, there's no fear that it's going to break. It's great. And
soft is not going to break.
It was so soft that it's not. Normally we say it's only a shvus. It's so soft that there isn't even an isur derabanan on Shabbos to sit on those reeds. In the case of Mardah, it's like vegetables. It's like grass sitting on the grass. We'll make sure that there's a nice area in the grass. And press them down together, like designate an area. Okay, there might have been muksa issues, there are other issues, but the issue of ishtamshus be'ilon is resolved. Now, frek yomar v'kivda min yerek. Now that you mentioned this cassia, this type of cinnamon bark, v'hotanan ein markiven pegam. You cannot graft pegam on top of kida levana, on top of this white cassia, because white cassia is called a tree, not a vegetable. Pagum is classified as a vegetable, and you're not allowed to crossbreed a vegetable and a tree. So here you see that a cassia is a tree. There's stam kida, yerek. Kida levana is classified halachically. The white kida is taka classified as a ilan. And my friends, now we are starting the new sugya, similar but not the same, of the Mishnah Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis. Here we're speaking about the placement of an eruv. Yes, the eruv has to be accessible, but now we're going to speak about a challenge, not because of halacha, but a practical challenge. Says the Mishnah, Neshamot b'migdal. If you place the eruv in a closet, and it's a closet that has doors, and you place it in there before Bein Hashmashis, and not only did you close the door, but you lock the door, and v'avad hamafteyach, and you lose the key. Which means that if you, the owner, would like to get the eruv, the only way you can get the eruv l'chura is by breaking down the migdal. Breaking down the migdal is an isur d'oraisa, right? It's called stira. Nevertheless, says the Mishnah, there's a eruv. However, the Tanach, and we'll see, the Gemara will explain why. Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to learn this. Rabbi Eliezer Keshitas derashba, another Rishonim, im eino yoideya shamafteyach b'mekayim. There's different types of lost. If it's taka lost, then eina eruv. Let me explain to you what really lost means. There is a place that you always put the key. And then there's a person, once they reach a certain age, they start forgetting things. You forgot where the location of the key is. That's not so bad, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. Because even though Bein Hashmashis, you did not remember where you placed the key, but the key is placed where it was always placed, you're going to remember where it is. If the key is not placed where it's normally, you lost the key. If your mamish lost the key, says Rabbi Eliezer, then you don't have an eruv. A lot more in this in the Gemara. Okay. So there's a certain level of losing the key where you say you would be unable to get it. You don't know where the key is. The Tanakama has to be understood. The Tanakama always says that the eruv is an eruv. The question is, who b'makim echad? Not halachically, it's just it's inaccessible. So says the Gemara, Rav and Shmuel, the Amri Talvayu, it must be Hache, the Migdal, Shalavevnim, Askinan. We're speaking about a brick, not a wooden closet that you'll have to break. Breaking is a problem. We're speaking about a brick closet. All you need to do is to take the bricks apart. As the Gemara will say in 2 lines, we're not speaking about bricks that were cemented together. That's weiter stira. If the bricks are not cemented together, we're going to quote a sheet of Rav Meir that lechatchila, you can go and take them apart. So since you are allowed to take the migdal apart, that's why I don't care that you lost the keys. But Rav Meir, he the Amar, poiches lechatchila v'noitel. Poiches means you diminish, it means you can break. That's not called breaking. You can take it apart. Detnan. Here we're speaking about a whole different topic. Here we're speaking about actually Yontif. But even on Yontif, you're allowed to cook food on Yontif. But if there is food that's so inaccessible to you that when Yontif comes in, without breaking Hilchas Yontif, you won't be able to get that food becomes muktzah. And even if something changed throughout Yontif, right, that's the whole din of even the iskatzoi lebein hashmoshes. We had this in Masechta Shabbos, iskatzoi for entire Shabbos, so it becomes muktzah. So says the Mishnah that if you have a house, shemilo peitus, but sasum, that house, that room, don't think about your big house, a little Talmudic house, was sealed. Nevertheless, says the Tanakama, if during Shabbos, v'nifchas, if it breached, if some of the bricks fell apart, now you are able to access the food. So then, you can go through there and take the food. Oh, hold on. Why isn't the food muksa? We'll explain in a moment. Rav Meir agrees, plus, he's not arguing, he's adding. He's saying it's not only that it's not muksa, to the point that if the bricks were taken apart, you can then take the food that were never muksa. No. Why? As the Gemara is going to explain in a moment, because the Mishnah is speaking about a house that was not cemented together, and therefore there was only air space in between the bricks. That is not called an act of stira. And let's go further. Even though normally you should not take it apart nonetheless, but when it comes to food, for Yom Tov, Rav Meir holds you can take it apart. So therefore, the pshat in the Tanakh in our Mishnah is, how is it not accessible? Because it's in a migdal, you lost the key? No, you can take the migdal apart. That the case in the Mishnah and Beya is only ba'avira the livni, when there's air space in between the bricks where it's not cemented. So the word says, Enochanami. That's the way we are explaining our Mishnah. That it's when they answered, the Gemara answered that our Mishnah is not migdal shel eitz that you have to break. It's a migdal of bricks. It's migdal shel aveinim hachinami ba'avira de livni. It's that it's bricks and they're not cemented together. That b'yom tov amru avolei b'Shabbos. When does Rav Meir say that you can lechatchila take it apart? Even though it's not biblical stira, but there's a rabbinic stira. Rav Meir only allows you to do it because on Yom Tov there are many hatadim for food. So therefore over here the kasha is that we are assuming that the heter of the Tanakh is because lechatchila you can take it apart. If it's on Shabbos, Rav Meir doesn't hold that you can lechatchila take it apart. Says the Gemara, hachinami, that our Mishnah, the son of Migdal, is b'Yom Tov. Yovaldik. We're going to stop over here, and God willing, to continue to further analyze our Mishnah. We did it. It's easy now. All right, we have to get ahead just one more daf. We're good. We could have slept another 10 minutes. I apologize. We could have started 6:30. I didn't know how. Thank you.